Record.
That little red.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about operating procedures, kind of how to get on the radio and how to make contacts, how to reply, all that kind of stuff. Sort of how to use your radio. So, since technicians are basically limited to VHF, UHF, except for a small section on the 10-meter band for single sideband, you're more than likely going to start off with a little handheld that's FM, and either talk simplex to other people with handhelds within a maybe 4 or 5 mile range, or through a repeater and maybe get 50 miles apart, depending on the repeater. But you're basically limited to line of sight and maybe a 15% increase where the radio waves actually bend a little bit around the earth. So you go a little bit over the horizon.
Bob, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Is anybody else having problems seeing the full slide? I'm only
I
getting like
see.
half of it, maybe.
This
Yep,
line,
I am as well.
You're only presenting this, not the full.
Well, actually, it got a line on mine.
If you stop sharing and share again, I think you might be able to fix it. Yeah, see, and then share full screen. Where's the share button? Share screen.
It might be me. I don't know.
No, I think it was here.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. Don't hesitate to point out problems. Okay, so when we talk to an FM repeater, it's a separate transceiver, basically, transmitter and receiver, but it receives on one frequency and transmits on another frequency simultaneously. So whatever signal it receives, it immediately broadcasts it on a separate frequency. And the difference in those frequencies we call the frequency offset. So when you get your handheld or even a base station, if you're talking on the FM band, you have to, one of the things you have to program is the offset. Now for VHF 2 meters, which is the most common one you're going to use, the offset is going to be plus or minus 600 kilohertz. For 70 centimeters, the UHF band, it's going to be plus or minus 5 megahertz. So, and in most cases, the repeaters are going to have a plus offset. Theoretically, they could be minus, but I'm not sure I've seen one that's negative. They tend to be the positive offset. And repeaters themselves are just like your handy-talkie, they're limited to line of sight. Typically, they're going to be on top of a tower, a very tall building. The NASA repeater here is on the top of the vertical assembly building, and it's 525 feet. So it's got a radius of over 30 miles. So, first question. What type of amateur station simultaneously retransmits the signal of another amateur station on a different channel or channels? Any guesses?
Charlie.
Very good. In fact, let's see. Just beacons only transmit. Okay, they don't receive and retransmit. It's a broadcast type thing, and they're normally sending kind of propagation information or some other temperature, things like that from satellites. And I'm not sure, Earth station is usually what we refer to as the station talking to a space station, which isn't necessarily the International Space Station. It's a satellite in orbit called a space station. What types of amateur stations can automatically retransmit signals of other amateur stations? Remember, they listed three things.
Guess I missed that, but I'm gonna go with Delta. Beacons only transmit,
All right,
so it's not D still.
right.
And Earth, I guess an Earth station can do it,
But it only transmits.
right? Okay, so then it's Delta,
Well, it received back, but it's the same.
right?
It doesn't retransmit.
So auxiliary,
Delta,
I figured is
repeater.
backup to the repeater.
Very good. Okay. In some cases, to get increased range, because you're in most of the repeaters, unless they're extremely high, you're going to be limited to the 20, 30 mile radius. So to get more distance, they can link repeaters together through microwave or telephone lines, different methods to connect them and basically create a network. We have one here called SARNet, which goes up, I believe, into Georgia. So it's a collection of repeaters that are linked together through Florida. So you can basically get all over the state through one of the SARNet repeaters. And sometimes they're linked via the internet. I don't think SARNet is. It's either microwave or telephone
In
line.
the description, I looked it up. It says microwave. They try to be as independent as possible.
Yeah, because it's pretty reliable. SARNet's up when there's a hurricane, and they're using it for emergency procedures. Another form of linked networks is with the digital voice. I think we talked about them before. There's DMR, D-Star, and Fusion, which kind of represent the three big manufacturers. DMR being all the Chinese stuff, a D-Star being ICOM and Kenwood, and Fusion being Yaesu. There's a few other, there's a free DV, which I haven't played with, and some other stuff, but those are the three big ones for digital voice.
And they're not interoperable.
Not directly. There are some kind of
P20
gateways where you can go from one to the other. Supposedly, I haven't ever figured out how you do it, but supposedly you can.
and P25 throws in another one.
Yeah, but that's old stuff.
That's
It's still
all that's-
around, but
That's
it's old.
all that's being rolled out by the military now.
Yeah.
And police, right? So
Right.
the fire department, the
Yeah.
police, because I was a firefighter, so I know.
So
that-
old Motorola stuff.
Yeah, old Motorola, and it's very good.
And E.F. Johnson.
Okay, which of the following describes a linked repeater network?
Alpha.
Very good. Oh, okay. In order to use repeater, like I mentioned before, you have to program certain things in it. And you can do that either through some programming software, and you connect to it via USB or Bluetooth or a hard cable, or you can do it usually from the buttons on the front of it. it's kind of tedious if you have to enter many doing it that way, but you definitely can. I mentioned the offset frequency is plus or minus 600 kilohertz for the 2-meter band and 5 megahertz for the 70 centimeter band. The other things that you may have to program in, and not all repeaters use the access tones, the CTCSS, which is constant tone carrier squelch something.
We don't know what it is.
And they're called subaudible tones because they're down below 250 hertz. And they do that so that they can kind of restrict access a little bit to the repeater, because you can have somebody on the same frequency as the repeater at a distant point, and because of propagation, you could be hearing them instead of the repeater or getting access to it. So that's one of the ways that they try to fix that, is by doing these access tones.
It's simplex people. I run into that. Configure it and then you only hear what you want to hear.
What is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band?
B.
Bravo.
Yes. What's a common repeater frequency offset in the 70 centimeter band?
5.
Alpha.
Those are gimmies.
To you.
Okay. And I mentioned the continuous tone coded squelch system. I can't remember what it stands for. Is used to cut down on repeater interference by distant stations. And it's a tone, and they're in discrete values from 67 hertz to 157 hertz. And when you look up information to program a repeater, that's one of the things you'll see is what the CTCSS tone is for that particular repeater. And it may be set for both transmit and receive.
Sometimes it's different.
And they could be different.
On computers.
They're also called a PL, right?
PL code, yeah.
And there's a digital form of it, which is called DCS.
But I never understood what's the difference. Why a digital form? It's an analog station. Why is a digital code to an analog station?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be to an analog, could be one that handles digital data or digital voice. I don't know. I've never actually used DCS, but it's listed in the repeater stuff.
In the repeater book, which I go to frequently to teach myself this stuff, I found a GRMRS repeater in Orlando that had a DCS code, and I thought that was weird.
I don't know. One of these days, I'll explore what DCS is used for. Supposedly, it's a similar thing to the analog CTCS, except it's some kind of digital, kind of like color code or DMR. What term describes the use of a subaudible tone transmitted along with normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver?
CSS.
Delta.
And unless you have extremely good hearing, you won't hear it.
That would
Because
not be.
it's, huh?
I said that would not be me.
Yeah, most people can't hear 250 hertz as they get older, at least. You start feeling it when it's down in those low frequencies.
Oh, that's cool.
Are you saying we're old?
Well, I don't know about you, but I am.
I am too.
Same.
I just had my birthday,
All right.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
the big 80.
No way.
Uh-uh.
Seriously?
Yeah.
All right.
You don't look it.
Yeah, seriously.
That's because I don't do anything healthy.
Well,
That's-
I am on the right track. What?
Which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater you can hear?
Ooh, all of the above.
Yeah. Even though we don't really know what a DCS code is, if you got the wrong one, you can't access the repeater. Okay. If you're having trouble, one of the things you can check is to use the reverse function, which is available sometimes, where you can actually listen on the input frequency of the repeater to see whether or not, and you need a separate radio to see whether or not you're picking up your signal that would be going to the repeater.
I never knew what that did is. I see the setting there and you know, you configure in a radio, but I never knew what it did.
But you need a second radio to do it. And if they say your transmission is distorted, it's hard to understand. One of the main reasons is because you're either talking too loud into the microphone or too close to it. Usually it's talking directly into it. You should talk across the microphone. So even like your handy talkie, you don't put it in front of your mouth, you put it sideways and talk across it. Otherwise, you get all that wind and spit sound in it, which is why you see the reporters and stuff, and they have those foam things and all that on there. Cut down on wind noise. How is a VHF UHF repeater's reverse function used?
To listen on an input frequency on C.
Yeah, Charlie.
Yep, very good. What would cause your FM transmission audio to be distorted on voice peaks?
C.
Charlie.
Yep. The key there is the voice peaks where you're over modulating.
A mouthful of potato chips will do it too.
Okay. So now that we know how to program the radio and actually talk to a repeater, how do we do that? Well, the accepted method is you give your call sign, and normally the protocol is you say this is, you unkey the mic for a second or two in case somebody else is keying theirs at the same time. So it's called doubling to make sure that there isn't somebody else talking. And then you give your call sign. So I'd say this is Whiskey 3 Romeo Delta Lima monitoring or listening. And that's kind of the equivalent of a CQ. That tells people that are listening to the repeater that you're on, listening for somebody to contact back because you don't know who's out there. And if you're trying to make a direct contact, then you would give the call sign of the station or person you're trying to contact, really station, I guess, correct, followed by yours. So you'd say Whiskey Alpha 4 Echo Charlie Tango, this is Whiskey 3 Romeo Delta Lima. And you normally want to use phonetic alphabet because it's easier to copy and understand.
That is a standard across like military, firefighter, police. They always
Right.
call people.
And they're not all the same. There's a military phonetic alphabet, the amateur radio one, and I've seen, and foreign countries use slightly different one. They tend to use the names of cities for a lot of the phonetics. London instead of Lima and things like that.
And the FAA throws in a few different ones.
Yeah. So if you're trying to reply to a call, then you give the caller's call sign followed by yours. So what is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign?
You watched the movies that I watched when I was a kid. Convoy. Convoy, one of my favorite movies. Say CQ 3 times.
Bravo.
Hey, Bravo.
Bravo sounds good. Which of the following indicates that a station is listening on a repeater and looking for a contact?
B.
Yep, Bravo.
Okay. um, well, could be several reasons. Repeaters operate in what we call duplex mode, where we receive on one and retransmit on another. In the case of direct contact, called simplex mode, and there's some defined simplex channels. There's a national calling channel for 2 meters and for 70 centimeters, which I have listed there. And it allows you to make a contact with another station without going through the repeater, if you're close enough. And that way you're not tying up the repeater. And I assume there's places where repeaters are busy, doesn't happen to be around here. You have no problem using the repeater because you hardly, except for nets in the evenings, hardly ever hear any activity on most of them. Except like SARnet, of course, that's a lot of repeaters.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity there. I like listening to those guys.
So what term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency?
Charlie.
Okay. Why are simplex channels designated in the VHF, UHF band plans?
A. No?
Alpha.
I want to say Delta.
But the whole point is not use the repeater.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I read that one.
Read it carefully.
Yeah. I thought it said didn't need a repeater.
Yeah. And again, you know, that's line of sight. So you're looking at probably 5 miles between the two. What is the national calling frequency for simplex operations in the 2-meter band?
I think it was Alpha, but I don't remember.
That's one I always had trouble with too, remembering those kind of things.
You remember them when you looked them up? It's programmed into your radio.
Yeah. And fortunately, that's the only one you have to remember because it's the only one on the test. So we talked about repeaters, auxiliary, and space stations, basically repeaters, that they automatically retransmit on a different channel or frequency. And in the FM thing, we're really talking channels. They're discrete frequencies. They can be linked together for extended range, like SARNet here. I'm sure there's similar things in other parts of the country. The frequency offset for 2 meters is plus or minus 600 kilohertz. For 70 centimeters, it's 5 megahertz. You need to use the CTCSS tones to access some repeaters. And if you can't connect, it could be because you've got the wrong offset, the wrong tone, or the wrong DCS code. If you are having trouble, you can, with another radio, use the reverse function to listen to see what actually you're sending out. If there's reports of a lot of distortion, then you're probably talking too loud and directly into the microphone. To make a contact, you say the station's call sign followed with your own. If you say listening, it says that you're looking for a contact and that you're monitoring the channel or the repeater. For simplex, you're talking on the same and receiving on the same frequency. So you don't use the repeater. And also, if you're not even close to a repeater, that's your only option to talk to somebody. And the national 2 meter calling frequency is 146,520.
Sometimes call it 5.2. That's it.
Yeah, they tend to. I don't want that.